Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren with Just the Facts, and I have a couple of guests with me this morning. We're going to be talking about the 709 Duluth School District. I have Art Johnston from the 4th District and our new board member, Alana Oswald, who campaigned and won at-large position. So welcome, Alana, and welcome, Art, to
Thanks,
Just
Marcia.
the Facts program.
Great to be here. Thanks.
We got a lot to talk about today. I'm not even sure where to start, but I think we'll start with Alana and ask her, as a new board member, a little bit about her experience and a few of the items that that really are particularly interesting to her. So we'll let you go ahead, Alana, and tell us a little bit about your last 2 months' experience.
Well, it's been an interesting journey. The learning curve is high, and I'm trying to keep up. I believe that, being on a board with 3 new board members versus just being by myself, I think I have a bit of an advantage to learning a lot more because people are more patient with you when you ask questions. So I'm asking the questions and, learning the questions to ask because I don't even really know what I don't know yet. The big part of the year right now is the budget, and we are handed a piece of paper and learn we have a $3.4 million deficit, and I don't know what that means or how it looks, and it takes a long time to absorb that. And I'm at the point where I'm asking the questions and people are telling me some answers, and I want to be responsible to our taxpayers because that's a lot of money, and administering a $134 million budget is not an easy task, and I don't want to rubber stamp anything. I want to know the whys and the hows, and so when people ask me what's going on, I want to be able to tell them. I want to be able to give them the answers they want and not just say, well, we had to raise taxes because we need money, or we had to cut this program because it wasn't working, or we just can't afford it, or there needs to be more reasons, because there's people ask, why not this instead of this, and why not this instead of this, and there's answers to those, and I want to make sure that I'm as transparent as possible.
Well, you had some experience before you got into being a school board representative. You worked in the district.
Absolutely.
You've got a background in education and seem to have, to me, from what I observed, seem to be understanding to the best of your ability at this point. So, how do you feel that you are working with the administration? Are they cooperating with you and giving you the information you want in a timely manner, or what's your thoughts on that?
It depends on the questions being asked and how much information is needed. I'm sure the administration wants to make sure they're thorough. At least I'm hoping that's what they want, and accurate. I asked about the budget. It took some time to get, but there was vacations involved and people that needed to look things up and understand where I was coming from. Other times it's an immediate request. There's a lot of negotiation and compromise going on, and that's the way it should be. No one should get everything they want, and I feel that I'm a part of a process and open and willing to negotiate and compromise, and I think that attitude going in is helping create change, and it's a slow machine to move, and it's a slow machine to change, but I think we're finally coming to understandings of how we can change those processes and be more transparent, because that's really what it's about. People don't know what's going on, and people want to know what's going on, and there's no reason we shouldn't be. There's no reason to hide anything. There's no reason to be upset if you get the information and the reasons why that is accurate and true. People get upset when they're stonewalled, when they're pushed off, where they're not answered, where they're not valued, and I'm not about that. I want to make sure that this is everybody's school.
Well, certainly that is the experience that Art has had, is stonewalled. I mean, if you got 12 to 16 Data Practices Act from some 2 years ago and you've never gotten answers on, we know that there's stonewalling going on, and I think that a board member should be able to get the information that they ask for in order for them to do their job properly, which is to represent the people. So
Right.
that's what I'm asking you is if you're getting the information so that you can do your job efficiently and productively.
I am slowly getting it, and I think it's just a matter of learning who I am and my expectations and my boundaries, and same with the administration. They have their expectations and boundaries, and if I'm asking something different or out of the box, it takes time to come to an agreement of how that's going to look, because they very much want to continue operating the way they've always operated, and I'm a new person with a different perspective, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that they're doing, and yet I don't believe it's entirely wrong, but it's wrong for me to be able to do my job. So it's negotiating a new, different.
Well, let's hope your experience is easier than what Art's been dealing
Please.
with over the years. So Art, let's start talking a little bit, because you do the figures and whatnot. Let's start talking a little bit about a one-page, as Alana mentioned, budget that was basically dropped in your lap. Did you get this information prior to the meeting electronically?
No.
Really? How come
We found out at the exact same time that we had a budget deficit that everyone else found out. And since then I have requested that our policy be enforced, that we receive all the information prior to, and I was told that this is the way it is so it can be explained to us when we go there. But as a new board member, I had no idea what I was looking at. I had no idea what this one page even represented or what any of these numbers mean, and everybody else is talking about numbers and I don't know what's going on, and it made me very uncomfortable. And yet the media is right there wanting to get the scoop on the story of this, what our budget looks like. And that's the response I get, is that they want to make sure they hand it to us when they can explain it to us. I asked that our policy be enforced as written, or that we change our policy to match our procedure, and that was the end of the discussion so far.
But I have heard over the years, and Art, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have heard, well, we send that stuff out electronically. You're supposed to have that stuff 3 days before a scheduled meeting. So why didn't they send a one-page proposal out electronically? It's not like it was 95 pages or anything, so why didn't you get that ahead of time is the question I should be asking as a taxpayer. How do you expect these people to be prepared?
I'll just jump in here. Not only did we not get it ahead of time, not only was it not sent to us electronically, we did not even get it at the start of the meeting. It was handed to us as Bill Hansen slowly kind of went over what he was going to present to us. First, he gave us a photocopy of the annual report, which had a little pie chart in it up on the top. And our superintendent, Superintendent Gronseth, looked at it, and he was very nice enough to go in and actually get the copy of the annual report when it was in color. The photocopy, you could not even see the pie chart because it was a photocopy. So we had that. We're looking at that. We didn't know what Bill Hansen was talking about because the photocopy was so bad we couldn't see it. Then we eventually got over to what the specifics of the budget were. And then he handed out this other page, which is this page here, kind of one pager. And we got that again, not at the start of the meeting even, where we could have looked at it and tried to scratch our head really quick and get out our pencil and maybe our calculator, which I used to actually take to meetings. I don't anymore because we never get stuff ahead of time. So that is problematic. I mean, Alana is absolutely right. On something like a budget is quite complicated. We see our audits. Our audits are about 100 pages long. There are many aspects of the budget. And of course what we got was one page, and it was very incomplete. It doesn't agree with any typical audit pages. It's just a page. In this case, what it had the unreserved general fund, which is one part of our budget. It's not even the whole part. It's not even the whole part of the general fund. We have a restricted general fund, and we have an unrestricted or reserved or unreserved, however you want to call it. This was only given the the unrestricted part of the general fund. Now, in previous years, I mean, Alana is correct, you know, she is new on this, and we weren't given, and when I came in here 6 years ago, I did not have a clue. It took me about 3 or 4 years to figure out what really was going on. When we got this page, we got a similar page 6 years ago, but you know, I didn't know that this was only part of the budget. I didn't know that there was other parts of the budget there.
So it's a pattern that they're following.
Well, even worse. Last year, for example, we were given the reserved and unreserved general fund because I keep all the handouts from previous years, so I can have a track record. 2 years ago, we were actually given a presentation on a PowerPoint with a spreadsheet. So you can do what ifs and stuff like, okay, if we decreased enrollment, this is going to cause a projected our general fund out to, I think at the time was 5 years. And those are all tools that management uses, and they're very handy. Of course, they never gave us, we never got a copy of that spreadsheet, of course, so we could do our own what-ifs. But they did give us some information, tools, that, of course, they didn't give it to us ahead of time then either. So when we got this, the only people that were present in the room that were really able to ask questions were Harry Welty and myself, because we've seen this before. Harry Welty was on the school board 10 years ago, and I've been on the school board 6 years. We have 3 brand new members, Alana being one of them, that doesn't know anything about this, and maybe I was remiss in not kind of giving some heads up to Alana too. But we didn't really know what we were going to get. We had nothing. We did not get anything electronically.
We had no idea. We just came off a surplus. Why would we expect a huge deficit like we have?
So I think that is one aspect of it, is we should have, as Alana said, she felt a little bit not able to participate because she really didn't get this ahead of time. And for example, there's some stuff on here, and I'm just going to use the words that were used. We have a deficit. It was reported in the paper the next day. We have this $3.3 million deficit.
Interesting how the news can report on something they haven't got a clue what they're talking about, and you have no information to even make a knowledgeable answer to any of it.
Well, some of the funniest.
Who are they getting that figure from then? Did they go to Gronseth and interview him to make this statement?
Well, the newspaper was at this meeting, and then they got it. Jana Hollingsworth did understand, because she probably, she understands probably more about the deficit or the budget than, say, some of the new school board members does, just because she has reported on it. Not real accurately, but she does report on it. But there was some of the stuff that was confusing. Is what we had a deficit, but it was called at the meeting, it was called the cost reduction opportunity, repeatedly. And I did ask.
Obfuscation, that's what I call that one.
Well, yeah, it certainly is. It's why don't they just call it a deficit? They've never called it this before, and I think Alana, don't let me put words in your mouth. I think you said you didn't even know what he was talking about.
True. By
that, because you weren't familiar with this thing. And I'm looking at it, and I say right away, and I wrote down cost reduction opportunity. It's not a good way to talk about it, because there was a lot of the new board members didn't know what he's talking about. Harry and I were probably the only ones in the room, other than Bill Hansen, the superintendent, that knew that a cost reduction opportunity is a deficit. I mean, Congress doesn't even, they don't use those kind of euphemisms. I call it a euphemism. And you say something that most people would understand. And in fairness to the Duluth News Tribune, they did, their headline the next day was deficit. So she converted cost reduction opportunity to a deficit. She also did talk about one of the why did we have a deficit, which was brought up thanks to Harry and I asking about this. Is it was one reason we have reduced revenue is because we've had reduced number of students. The student number has went down, and now on the expenditure side, we've had reduced revenue because we've had reduced students. Remember, the students bring in about 11,000 in state aid every year, which is more than the formula, but that's another discussion.
Student, 11,000 per student.
And it's actually closer to about 12, but somewhere in there. So since we've lost, last year we lost, 270, students. That's a lot of money. That's, that's about $3 million. And that's...
It's about half an elementary building, if you want to think about it in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about how many people are in Stowe.
Yes, it depends on your school building, yes.
Yeah.
So Lakewood, it would be the entire population of Lakewood. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That makes it more visible
Right.
when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah, and so that's why we lost on revenue as a reduction in that. Now that the budget we were given, the revenue went from 84 down to $80 million. And why didn't it go down more is we had a formula increase by the state of about $1 million, or $1.5 million projected. That's what they think, because there is more money coming to schools because they keep increasing the formula. Now, where were the expenditure? We ended up having $3.3 million reduction, even though the revenues didn't go down that much. Now, remember, we're only talking about the unrestricted general fund here. It's about $84 million. Our total budget's about $125 million. So there's a lot that isn't even included here. But let's just talk about what they gave us. The biggest expenditure increases were salaries, of course. They estimated about $1.5 million increase in salaries based on our 2% pay raise that we're giving our teachers and our other staff. We also had an estimated about $600,000 increase in health care costs. So over in there, that the lion's share of that deficit was caused by increase in salaries. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, because people should be getting an increase in salaries, to keep up with inflation. But that was negotiated. For example, those contracts were negotiated, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was the first year that Harry Welty got elected to the board. We went out and we went through a 4-year contract. So even these contract negotiations were done before we even knew what our deficit might be, or whether or not we're going to have a surplus. It seems like there should be not quite as, and that's one reason I objected to it. I did vote against the pay increase for the teachers because of all these reasons. But what was the future going to hold?
Right.
So that's one of the things they did do here that they talked about was one way to reduce the expenditures was they are eliminating 4 to 5 teachers. And why? Of course, we asked why, and that's where some of the discussion came. And of course, the discussion then came, well, we lost that because we've lost students. And that, of course, makes sense. That is not, obviously, if you lose students, you're going to have to lose teachers. If you go back to 2 years, when we passed a referendum, in fact, looking at my notes from the budget then, we increased 16 teachers at the time based on, I think it was a $1.9 million increase that the revenue operating levy that was passed gave us. So that included 16 new teachers. Now here we are, we're already removing at least 5 of those teachers. And we still have a $3.3 million deficit. Even reducing 5 teachers, we still have the $3.3 million deficit.
And it's important to remember that's to maintain the status quo with large class sizes and those sorts of things that accompany with less teachers. We're just maintaining the same ratio of teacher to student. If we were able to keep those 5 teachers, there would be a decrease, although slightly, in class sizes. Granted, where are those 5 teachers, and they can't be in every school and those sorts of things. So you need to think about the bigger picture sometimes and see how it affects the overall health of our system, because our teachers are frustrated with the large class sizes and they shouldn't have to put up with it.
And we were promised the red plan was going to eliminate this problem. Mm-hmm. It's only exacerbated it as far as I can see.
Yes.
Now, I could be wrong, but it seems to me it's exacerbated it. And, okay, should we not look at the question of why do we lose 200 and some students? I mean, over the years, I've kept asking Art, so How do we lose kids in the middle of a month, a couple months into the year, or in this early spring or late winter, and then we lose more right at the end? And the finally dawned on me that some of these students, once it becomes 16, and I just realized this, once it becomes 16, they can leave the school district. Are these kids?
I think state law upped it to 17 this year. Recently, I'm pretty sure they can't drop out.
Well, whatever.
17 anyway, but
whether
still,
it's 17 or 16, nonetheless, these kids are leaving school. I can't say that, I would have a hard time believing that parents will take their student out of school a few weeks into the school year, or, like I say, early winter, late winter, and then right before school ends, that they'd be moving them to some other school. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. But if a kid can leave the district at 16 or 17, that makes perfect sense to me. They're frustrated, they're not getting what they need, or they're controlling the situation, which is a lot of the case today too. But it doesn't make any sense that parents would just take their kid out and put them someplace else. And when you find out that the enrollment in your charter schools is full, there's a waiting list, well, those kids aren't getting in there. So where are these kids going?
Well,
This is 200 students. That's a lot of kids in 1 year to leave a district.
We haven't lost the students, so the children are still in Duluth, according to the census. If you go back, and I think we talked about this last time, it's on your program, is that the increase has went to other school systems in our area.
But usually at the beginning of a year, or
no, it
certainly?
continues pretty much. We always have every school in June, they have a higher number, and the enrollment keeps going down throughout the year. At least that's the history of Duluth. I actually can't say that for other schools. I'm assuming everybody has that a little bit. But why is it so important in Duluth? Going back to that budget, they actually projected out next year's. And next year's, they're projecting another decrease of about 200 students next year. Now, this is administration is actually decreasing.
Yeah, and he said that.
I mean, they're projecting that. And so when is this going to end? And your point is right. I mean, we could talk all day. We could get off the budget and talk about why are children leaving the schools. It's because of their parents. I think the biggest thing I've heard campaigning is large class sizes. It isn't just the teachers that don't like large class sizes. The parents don't like it either. And with the smaller your student body becomes, the smaller your enrollment becomes, the less opportunity you have to have a more diverse curriculum. You can have less sections, so you can have less sections of, say, Spanish 5. You can have less sections of the Fab Lab. You can have less sections of general English and biology. And there becomes less opportunity. And that's probably the next thing we hear about is, why couldn't my kid take this class? Why couldn't they take that class? They had to make a choice they could not take the classes that they really wanted. And some of those people will pull their kids out of the school and go elsewhere. And now remember, in fall of 2017, Edison is going to open. Edison, for people that don't know, that's the charter school. It's North Star Academy. Right now it's a K-8 school. They are adding 12. Oh, there is a Raleigh Edison too, yes. Yeah. So they have 2 branches. But they're going to be opening up 9-12 high school up by the North Star Academy. And we don't know how that's going to impact us. I mean, you're looking into the crystal ball, but will probably impact us. It's getting back to, why do people pull their kids out of the public school? I think there was an article in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune here last week, or was it this week? I don't remember when it came out, talking about Minnesota has not been reducing the achievement gap, nor the graduation rate, the low graduation rates. And that was headlines in the Minneapolis paper. They didn't talk about Duluth, luckily, but they did talk about all the urban schools and the suburban schools, and virtually every public school, well, I won't say, at least the ones that they mentioned, they made it sound like the norm is that Minnesota public schools are not being able to reduce the achievement gap, which is a gap between whites and colored kids, and nor are they being able to increase the graduation rates. And that's bad news when you have a liberal paper. I'll say liberal just because they're very pro-public education, of course. And even they are saying there's something wrong with the state of education in Minnesota. And just to remind you too, we've talked about this in the past, that Duluth achievement gap and graduation rates are worse than the Minnesota average. And so parents know this. I mean, parents, they read the paper as well. And they say, gee, things are not really good in Minnesota, and gee, things aren't real good in Duluth. And of course, you can see the chaos in the school board hasn't helped. But it is really easy to pull our kids out, and the numbers show, getting back to your question, Marcia, that Hermantown has increased students, Proctor has increased the students, Renshaw has increased, Marshall, I think, is full. The Edison schools are almost full, because I know some people are trying to get in, and there's a waiting list. Harbor City is, I think, full. We have the St. James Catholic school system, been in Duluth for many years. We have the new Christian Academy, and both of those, I understand, are nearly full as well. And some of those schools, like Marshall and the Christian Academies, there's tuition they have to pay. These are not public schools. All the other schools are public schools, so they can, if somebody doesn't like their lack of curriculum being offered, or their child not being able to take Spanish 5 or whatever it is, they want their kids to take Spanish 5 along with chamber orchestra, for example, like they can't take in Denfeld. They're going to pull their kids out, and they'll send them right over the hill, literally, to Proctor, and that's what happens.
Proctor is closed as far as open enrollment goes now. And that's what I heard at the beginning of the year. They had to close it because they couldn't afford to take any more of our students.
Renshaw gets half of its student population from Duluth.
And this I've heard.
There's lots of reasons that people want to leave our district. I want to make sure that they want to stay. And I think we need to do a better job of selling ourselves as a customer service agent, not as this is what you get. You know, we're giving you options. Why aren't you taking advantage of them? It's give people what they want. I think that's, how the charter schools have succeeded, is they had to create a model of education that people want. They're all about needing their students to come and wanting their students to come, because if they don't come, their school doesn't exist. Public education's existed on the presumption for 100 years of, we exist and therefore you get it.
You're the only game in town.
Yes.
Now they have some competition, which is the only way to make them improve. However, it doesn't seem to be making,
right.
And I think it's because, this is my opinion, and I don't ask you to agree or disagree with it, but I think we have someone in the position of the superintendent that really wasn't qualified to be in that position, and he is not doing a very good job. This is my observation, and so.
Well, and I think we can always improve on what we're doing. I believe
it's time to start.
I believe there's, like you said, there are 16 or 17-year-olds that are choosing to leave, but if you look at our enrollment drops, the vast majority of the enrollment drops from our district are at the younger levels. There's not that many 16 or 17-year-olds leaving compared to elementary age kids.
So Denfeld is not one of the major issues here?
Of course.
This is what I've heard.
Of course it's a major issue, but there's bigger issues the younger you go. Our system's far from perfect at every level. We need to treat parents better and reacting. There's a lot of social issues between students and climate and culture issues that go unresolved, or because our processes that are established are so slow moving, people don't get the results they need in a timely fashion, and they get impatient and leave. And a lot of times, in the stories that I've heard from parents that reach out, I would do this. I would make the same decision because it's their child, and their child is worth more than having to work through a system that's not attentive to their needs. And I understand, especially with our assistant superintendent, Amy Starzecki, she does a wonderful job with the people she can reach. She can't reach everybody. And by the time the information gets filtered up through the systems that are established, it's oftentimes too late. So we need to address the way things are handled and improve upon those systems to be more customer service oriented and be more proactive in adjusting how we interact with people. We need to value them. They are valuable. The kids are the most important things for the future of our society. And they're not really things. I didn't mean it that way. But this is why we're in the business, is we want to create great adults that find their passions.
Well, I guess what I'm seeing is only from the administration level, because I'm not where you have been within the district. So there are problems there, although I spoke to a former teacher the other night, and I was shocked at what he experienced as an employee of this district before Gronseth even came. And so there seems to be a whole lot of problems that need to be addressed, and because it's not being addressed, the system is starting to implode, which is not good for anybody.
No.
And of course, I'm a taxpayer, so this is where my ilk comes from, is I don't see the product that I saw when I went to school and the education that I got. It seems to me there's too much political undertonings going on that's just not, this system is not working, and it's got to have somebody that knows what they're doing at the top to fix it.
Well, I think it's important, Marcia, for you to say that you are a Denfeld grad. Denfeld has a very noble history. It's a very proud history. The people in Denfeld are kind of scrappy. They've always been on the working part of town, but they have a lot of endowments that go to graduates. Denfeld should be an outstanding school. I mean, it's an outstanding school in many ways, but we have been losing enrollment. There's no question of that. And as school board members, I talk about, and I'm in the news a lot. I talk about some of the things that I think have to be fixed. I'm not saying that to say that our public schools are bad. I'm saying that to try to fix a problem. We have serious problems. I mean, it's obvious that we have serious problems still in Duluth. We have serious problems in the state. But having said that, that does not mean we should walk away from our schools. We just spent $315 million on new schools, and we have to have these schools succeed. Now, your concern, you've heard about teachers. As a school board member, I get calls all the time, and Alana's getting those now too, about parents that are upset, about teachers that are upset, about staff that think they've been mistreated. Now, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. I mean, we don't, just because somebody says they were treated poorly or they weren't treated with respect and they're mad, then therefore they're going to pull their kids out of the school. We can't believe everything people tell us. We have to do our due diligence to make sure. But we do hear that. And all the door-to-door campaigning that I've went to, for 2 times, 2 elections, is that I keep hearing I hear a lot of people are not happy with the Duluth schools. And I have never heard people complain about the Edison school systems. I mean, I have not. Now, I've talked to many of their staff, many of their parents, and I do not hear that. I've talked to parents that send their kids to Proctor. Particularly, I represent West Duluth, and many kids in West Duluth, this is close to send their kids to Proctor. And particularly if you live in Fond du Lac or Gary, Renshaw is closer than sending their kids to the Lincoln Park Middle School. And there's less bus ride. And all those schools send buses up here to pick up children.
Well, they do.
And I do hear this. And Alana and she informed me of some MDE meetings, MDE, Minnesota Department of Education, and I'm going down to some of these meetings. In particular, one we're doing is Title I money and how that the new laws rolling out. We talk a lot about that, but we also network a lot with other. Most of these people are either teachers in charge of Title I money, some school board members, some administration, and there's a wide range of people. And so we're always sitting and talking in the hallway, and one of the things I noticed, I remember one guy we were talking to, and they were doing better on the achievement gap. Some schools have eliminated the achievement gap in Minnesota. And of course, we ask one, whenever I hear that, I say, well, how do you do it? What can we do? And that conversation always comes back to, of course, they work really hard. And we have hard-working teachers too. But one of the things that I always hear is customer service. Our schools, just because we're a public school, we have to be able to sell ourselves that we are a successful school and that we want to make sure those parents want to send their kids there. And we want to make sure we keep our good teachers. We want to make them. We don't want them worried about class sizes. Mm-hmm. Now we can't answer everybody's problem, but other schools have done it. The charter schools, and remember, charter schools are public schools. They are supported. You don't have to pay tuition because they are supported by the taxpayers of Minnesota. And Harbor City. In Edison, I don't hear complaints about them. The Harbor City has eliminated the achievement gap. And other schools are doing better. These other schools are doing with the Christian Academy. Their academics are, well, I understand, quite high. Marshall, of course, it's a private school. It's our most expensive school, but they have very high achievement in their schools. So we have to do something about that, and I think it starts with customer service. And sorry, I'm going to say this, but when our school board is very nasty to a school board member, like they have been to me, for example, because I bring up some of these questions, look what they tried to do to me, remove me from the school board. Luckily, I had enough wherewithal to be able to stop that. But think of parents who are discouraged. They don't want to fight the administration. If they're going to go after a school board member, what do you think? How do you think their customer service is toward their parents? The parents that come there, the students. And I've talked to parents. I've sat into conferences where the parents are trying to find some way to make things better. And in many cases, they just throw up their hands and say, I'm tired of this. And they take their kids to Proctor. And I've heard that so many times, Marcia, and to me it makes me feel really, really sad because I like our schools. We have nice schools. I think we have very good staff, but sometimes we don't, and we have to address it. We've got to keep those people in our school because I think we are in a downward spiral.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that issue of not addressing the needs of the parents. Because I'll go back, my son is 48 this year, I'll go back 43 years ago. They didn't cooperate with me when I had a concern. And I didn't learn until after I'd taken him out of that system, stuck him in the only alternative there at the time, that he could have gotten Title I programming. Because you brought up Title I programming. I'm sure there are other parents that have gone through the years and they could have had Title I programming too and they didn't get it. But they wouldn't address my issues. And so, yes, I pulled my son out and I never looked back. With my other two never went to public education. It was all private or home education. So I understand that issue real well. So it doesn't just start with this administration. There's a long history of this type of a problem, which takes an administrator who has got some years behind them of working in a situation to address that and deal with it. And it's not being done because the superintendent's not qualified. But, okay, then we should look at these other types of schools sit down and have conversations with them. Ask them to come to a business committee meeting perhaps, or a special board meeting where you ask them, well, how does Harbor City stop the achievement gap? How does how do other schools deal with the bullying? When I was candidating, I talked to a board member from the North Star Academy, and there was no such thing as bullying allowed. Now, did instances come up? Surely they did. But they dealt with them in such a way that it did not get worse. The kids understood that they were in authority, they were under authority by the administration and the teachers. You didn't have kids roaming the hallway like I hear going on at the new Taj Mahal, which is what I call the Lincoln Park Middle School. Kids roaming the hallway, and now somebody new that I spoke to out at East, and a former teacher confirmed it, that the kids are in the hallways running around doing things they're not supposed to do instead of being in class. So why aren't we addressing these problems? That's why parents don't want their kids in school. Surely their kids have some concerns that they bring home. So why aren't these things being addressed? It's not good enough for me to hear it talked about at a board meeting. When I talk to people when I'm not at a board meeting and they tell me the problems that are going on. So maybe we should ask North Star to come and Harbor City to come and some of these other schools, come and sit down and tell us how you deal with these problems, because it's very obvious to me the person at the top hasn't got a clue.
Well,
other than setting up another program that doesn't work, or setting up a policy that they don't follow, you know, I mean, that's just fluff. I want to get to the bottom of the problems, as I'm sure you do, and these parents want to see that happen.
An example of, Marcia, what you just said is that here a year ago, almost a year ago this month, we got a letter from Denfeld teachers concerned about the lack of preparation. They were concerned about kids who are coming up into the high school, which is 9th grade, that didn't know their multiplication tables, that could not read, sometimes at 3rd grade levels. These are kids in 9th grade. And they were bringing that. They sent a letter to the school board, and they wanted to meet with us as a school board. Well,
two teachers did. 2 male teachers came to a school board meeting.
Well, eventually, yes, but that was very distilled. We were not allowed to meet with all the teachers. In fact, the administration axed that, and we have not heard a report of that. The teachers did come and talk a little bit about the problems, but we had no follow-up. We don't know if the teachers got the help that they needed. They didn't know if there's been any follow-up on that. And so the school board, we were not informed. And if the school board wasn't informed, the public wasn't informed. The parents weren't informed. You know, what did happen? They had legitimate complaints. I'm assuming they are sincere. These are good teachers. And I was like, whoa, they've got some issues here. Well, how are we going to solve them? None of that ever came before the school board again.
I'm not surprised.
On purpose.
I'm not surprised.
Right. It was on purpose because it wasn't a success to be celebrated, as we were told.
Right.
Well, so it's very frustrating in those aspects, because that's why I'm thankful for you recording this program and other opportunities we have to speak out as board members, because especially from a new perspective, I can say that we don't get a lot of information. And I've always known that everything is filtered up, and I've been part of those conversations within the district of how do we sell this to the board? We can't say this because it'll never go for it, let's sell it this way. And so I know there's a lot of convincing going on, and you know, maybe some manipulation in the way things are handled. But once I do hear and have heard of complaints, my response to those people are, you know, I know you're unhappy and I know you're going to do what you're going to do, but, you know, would you be willing to come and give us feedback on this experience so we know how to improve ourselves? And I haven't had a parent refuse that request, because they always say, I don't want to have another parent go through what we've been going through. The problem is that there's no real process established for those parents and to sit down at the table with the parties involved without the administration feeling threatened because this is an angry parent or whatever the issue was. And so they're still in the, wanting to deny it happened or say that, we did what we could and, this is your choice and let it fall on the parent's shoulders. There's no real system for improvement. And we need to create that. And that's what I'm hoping to do in my term, is create a system of improvement and not just a continuous improvement plan set up by an administrator or anything generic like that. People want to be invested in their community education. I know that. People don't want to leave. But sometimes that's just the easier thing to do because you drain them of their resilience.
I didn't have much of it, but I had enough of it that I just went,
Right.
I'm not going to deal with this. Okay, that pretty well covers what my feelings are on why things aren't going anywhere. There's no plan, but I've seen parents come to the school board meetings. I've seen the microphone shut off on them. I've seen attitudes of holier than thou, who no longer is on the board, thank goodness. I mean, she looked down her nose at just about anybody and everything that was said that didn't agree with her rose-colored glass view of the board. Everything is fine, and we have all these wonderful buildings, blah, blah, blah. And yet the reality would stand right there in front of her, and she would deny it. So it's good that she's gone, but let's hope that the current school board chair takes her rose-colored glasses off, because I'm afraid she's following right in her footsteps.
I have hope.
Well,
And
we have to have hope, but
I didn't
from
have
my
hope.
viewpoint.
I didn't have a lot of hope when I first started this. I was nervous, I was scared. I had our immediate history. It took a lot of convincing to get me to even consider running, and then once I won, it was me being scared of what's to come. And I have to say that it's not as scary as it has been because I do not see it repeating yet. We've had wonderful discussions at committee meetings, which have never happened before in my 10 years of coming to meetings off and on. I wish more people could see that discussion because, we're lucky if 1 or 2 people show up. As you know, you're often the 1 or 2 people that are able to make a committee meeting and see the actual conversations that go on and the personalities and the compromising and the negotiating and
that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
This is something that is foreign even to me in the process of what has gone on in the past, and the difference between me watching it and sitting at the table. And I know that I'm 1/7 of the change of being able to create that atmosphere and create the discussion and actually get people to think differently. And that's so hopeful that there's so much potential. And I really think that we can keep up the potential and turn it to realities and create the change that we need to make a wonderful school system for our city and be one of the best, if not the best choice for our parents. But we have to be willing to make those changes and not be defensive and look for improvement. Nobody's perfect. We're not going to be a perfect system. We're always going to have that one thing that we just might not be able to change. But we got to turn over every rock, every stone, and exhaust every possibility to make things happen the way they need to be for all of our students, not just for 1, not just for 2. We need to listen to parents and from what they want and what they need.
And the teachers.
Right.
And other staff members.
I look at a lot of people telling me, how dare we spend so much money on a brand new Spanish immersion program that we're starting next year. We've invested a lot of money into that as an administration and hiring teachers, buying curriculum, translating curriculum, those kinds of things, and yet we have this big deficit. And yet I know I'm torn between both sides. I mean, when I think of a $3.3 million deficit, I think, well, that's got to go. I mean, because that could take care of a huge chunk of that. But yet, on the other hand, it's preparing for the future too. That I know there's a want and a need in the community to do this too, and to make our schools more attractive and invest in our kids. And so there's always those two sides of the coins, and you got to find the right balance. it's very frustrating in that respect that I have all these thoughts going on in my head, and yet I don't know how to reconcile them without asking questions, and I don't always have a person available to bounce those ideas off of that can give me the perspective of inside versus outside, because we as school board members, we are on the outside, and the day-to-day stuff happens on the inside, and we have problems connecting. Sure, we can ask a question, but I've already been told, I asked too many questions in a couple days, and how can I expect the people to do what they need to do every day and yet take time out all the time to answer my questions? And my response is, it's not going to be every day, because you answer my question once, I don't have to ask that question ever again.
Well, let me encourage you. From my first impressions of you, and of course I sat there at business committee meetings, so that's where I saw more of your action, is you were connected from the very beginning. It wasn't, I have no clue what's going on, I'll just turn the pages and make it look like I'm doing something. You were connected from the very beginning, and I appreciate that, and do ask the questions. And I've encouraged Art in the same way. You need to keep on doing what you're doing, because your involvement is possibly waking up 4 people on that board who are there because they got elected, but they're really not doing their job. And I've seen this when I was on township board, same thing. It's not peculiar to the school district, and I see it in soil and water. So it's all elected boards. There are some that do the job, and there are others that don't. And the ones that ask the questions may not be liked, but you've got to ask the questions. So.
Well, we're not just here to ask questions either.
No.
We are here, we have to ask questions to understand it, because we are the outsiders, as Alana said.
Right.
For example, the budget. When we get a one-page sheet of paper like this, it's hard to even ask questions. And I think Alana's been, there's MSBA, Minnesota School Board Association training, and I'm hoping that they had a person there from the state that talked about where does the money come from. It comes from the state. This is a budget item, and what's the history of that? How is it determined? All the little things. We got scarcity revenues. We got integration revenues. We've got the general fund revenue. We've got many, many pockets of money that we get money. I think they do a pretty good job from the state to try to tell how the money comes. Then you come back to your school. Again, it took me years to figure out what was going on. It really shouldn't take that long. Now, for example, this one-page budget, there's some stuff in here that I'm hoping that the choice is not cutting Spanish immersion or getting rid of the deficit. I think that we need to show parents, if we start cutting our classes, fewer parents are going to start coming to it's that downward spiral.
Right.
And we want to stop that. One way to stop it is to make sure our curriculum is increasing, that we're attracting people. Hey, we got Spanish immersion, really cool. And so we have to find other ways to cut some of them. Some of the things in the budget, which are not even on this page, for example, are we've had an increase in administration by, we don't quite know yet because it's not on here, but at least according to the UFARs and our audit report from last year, we had an increase of either 1.5 or 2.5 million, depending on which numbers you look at. Now, what's going to happen this year? Are we going to increase administration costs again? Let's put it back down to where it was 2 years ago. Let's save that 1.5 million in administration costs. Those are avenues that when we as school board members are looking at things, I'd kind of like to know, why did the administration costs go up 1.5? Now I'm sure there's many people in there that are valuable and important, but I would much rather have Spanish immersion, for example, than have an increased number of administrators in our school. And so those are things that we as school board, those are questions that we should have before us. Okay, administration went up 1.5 or maybe 2.5 million, that's almost our deficit. Let's reduce that down. What are those people doing? again, one of the things we do as school boards, we don't do day-to-day stuff. We don't hire people. We don't tell teachers what to teach. We do look at budget. We approve a budget, and we also hire the superintendent. And the budget is something that we really have to look at, and one page isn't sufficient. And what are all these questions that we can talk about? So many things. We can talk about the teacher cost increases. I'm not opposed to that, but we still have to deal with the deficit. Okay, what happened? Why did the administration costs go up so much? Something I always bring up is, what about our debt payments? A significant amount of those are coming out of the general fund to the tune of $3.3 million, which is exactly what our deficit is. Those all should be on the table. None of those are a panacea to fix our deficit, but seems like they should be on the table. And that we as a school board like to have people come in like yourself, Marcia, like to have 30 people coming in looking at our budget and saying, hey, why don't you cut $1.5 million in administrative costs? But more important is, people are going to have and say, hey, wow, here's some other ideas. Why don't you do this?
Absolutely.
And we are not school experts. No. We represent the interface between the community and the school. We need that community to come and talk to us. On the other side, we need the administration to talk to us, which they don't do a very good job at, like we've been talking about.
They talk at you rather than with you.
Yeah, I mean, like calling something a cost reduction opportunity, and some school board members don't even know what he's talking about for half the meeting. Like, okay, that is not good communication skills.
I'm going to say this, cost reduction opportunity. I thought of the answer to that. Cost reduction opportunity is, we've lost all these students, so we can reduce our costs.
Well, that's not, to me, that's not a very good, I don't look at deficits as being an opportunity.
It's a satirical comment, that's all it is. But I want you to clarify what UFARBs are for the public. And then you were talking about administration. I would say this, okay, if they got along without this administration 2 years ago, why can't we go back to getting along without them simply because we have this major deficit? How is it that we have to have those people now when we got along without them 2 years ago?
And part of it is contract negotiations. We've agreed to new contracts that have increased salaries and benefits.
But also,
so there's parts of those costs.
You added upstairs on the third floor.
Yes.
You filled up all those empty offices that were empty 2 years ago. I know that for a fact, because that's where I have the soil and water meetings. And those were empty offices. They're now full. Why is that administration important when it wasn't there before? But what is UFARB? What is UFARB?
UFARB is a uniform finance accounting reporting system. I'm taking a guess at that.
It's the school district ways of maintaining the budget.
Yeah, it's required, it's mandated actually by law. It's administered by the Minnesota Department of Education. There's many, many codes. It's a fairly complicated system. It's a fairly good system. Schools have to fill in the blank on every code of whether it be administration costs, some of the numbers that we looked at earlier. When you look at the cost of administration, that is a UFARS code. We have UFARS, we have administration, we have the on-reserve budget, we have the unassigned reserve budget. We have lots of things that are all in there. And that's mandated by the state. Our auditors come in and they kind of audit, are those numbers being reported correctly to the state? And so that's an accounting system, fairly complicated, but it does help us out. Nobody in the administration ever told me about UFARs, and I've had to learn it myself. It is something that we can check out. For example, I can go back, I can find out. The state takes a long time to compile this data, so we're usually about a year or two behind. But I can go into the UFARs and I can find out where we were at in December, because it has to be reported.
We're going to wrap this up now. We've only got a minute or two left. One thing I do want to say to the public is, back in January, Jana Hollingsworth made a statement that you asked for an 11% increase in the salary for the school board members, and that was totally taken from something that Annie Harlow, the chairman, said. Have you gotten a retraction from the newspaper as to whether or not you said that?
I've had meetings with the newspaper. I have recordings of that meeting. I'm the only one who had a recording of that meeting. The newspaper recorder indicated to me that she made an error, and she was apologetic to me, but never was a retraction made in the paper, even though she indicated to me that it was an error.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. At least maybe the folks will see it here. And I really thank you for coming in today, and hope we can get a chance to sit down and talk again. Thanks
Please.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.